From setting off on our holiday until we reached Folkestone, we had so much luggage to carry that photography was out of the question, but safely aboard the cross-channel ferry in Folkestone harbour, we could put down our luggage and begin to take some pictures. This is a view of Folkestone from the steam packet. The crossing was so smooth, it was reminiscent of Lake Windermere. Being too dark at Boulogne to take any further pictures, here is our first glimpse of the River Rhine. And now our first glimpse of the snow-covered mountains of Switzerland, taken from the train as we passed through Klosters. Here is Davos Dorf's railway station. Notice the flowers. And here is Davos Platz, where we were going to spend the next 10 days. This is a view of the town hall with the ski slopes of the Parsen in the background. This is a typical Swiss house. Notice all the verandas. The square building is the Hotel Victoria, where we were to stay for the next 10 days. Davos has a good football team and many parks which are always well patronized. Above the hotel were the slopes of the Schatzalp, where abounded many small brown squirrels. They were exceedingly fast, and we couldn't for a long time coax them out into the sun. Although I tried to follow them with the camera, I'm afraid they were too fast for me, and the light wasn't sufficient. You are exceedingly brave. One of the most expensive pastimes of holidaying in Switzerland is the morning coffee. Here we are in Vaduz in Liechtenstein. Again, view of the town hall. This was another little village on our way back to Davos. Notice the very narrow streets and always the geraniums, even on the village pump. This was the manor house at the head of the village, and we are now on our way to the Gondelbahn to take us to Strela Pass. This is a view from the Gondelbahn as we swung out over space on our way to the heights. There is a view of the Fluela. We are now on Strela Pass itself, and like many of the passes in Switzerland, you will note how commercialized they have become. Here we have a large restaurant to cater for the visitors. Many signposts are to be seen, presumably for the direction of the skiers in winter. This is a view down the valley looking towards Rosetta. Note the general rugged appearance of the rock formations. This is looking from Strela Pass over towards the Parsen. Here we have a view of Davos way down in the valley. Another view through the trees. You can see from this how far up we were. On our way down, I took a sequence of a typical house, and here again we are nearer to Davos. And now one of our trips out to St. Moritz. Here is the top part of the town, and down below we have the spa of St. Moritz, and most of the buildings you see are convalescent homes. Note the snow-covered mountains in the far distance. Here we are on our way to Lake Como. Notice the little church halfway up the mountain. There it is, halfway up the mountain. I guess it doesn't get many people there on a Sunday. Here is a view of Bellagio, and here is a typical street in this village. This is the lakefront of Bellagio, a very popular place on Lake Como. The weather was about 90 degrees Fahrenheit. Here we are in Dongo. That was the place where Mussolini was captured by the partisans towards the end of the war. This is the children's bathing pool in the grounds of Hotel Europe in Davos. Sunbathing. We were glad of a rest. I didn't much care for the trips every day because they were far too tiring. Rosalind enjoyed herself very much. Here we have a little Swiss boy who was simply fascinated, just watching the two girls play about in the lake. This is a view down the main street of Davos, corner of the hotel and the front of the Hotel Europe. Another view down the street. Notice the building on the left. Here is a closer view of it. Notice its multicolored umbrellas, which seem to be a feature of many of the houses. This is Davos Lake, which is an artificial lake made to provide water power for the hydroelectric scheme further down at Fideris during winter, when most of the lakes are frozen over. We have now climbed to the top of the Parsen, one of the typical ski slopes in the winter resort part of Switzerland. This is a general view of the mountain tops. It's taken from the top of the Parsen. We were most fascinated by the snow even in August. Snow, you can see now, was 6 feet deep and more. I went down to collect some for the children. Here is the mountain conference at the top. This is the Fluella Pass, the main road from Switzerland into Italy. Most of the mountain tops, as I mentioned before, are commercialized. Here is the restaurant on the Parsen. There is an observation balcony where you can see for miles. We are now on our way down the Rack and Pinion Railway back to Davos in the valley below. Thoroughly exhausted by our climb, we indulged in a spot of sunbathing from the veranda of our room at the hotel. Believe me, that rest was marvellous. Now back to the Schatzalp again, and this time we were able to entice the squirrels out into the open. This one got very annoyed because my wife made him fight for the nut. We are now in Klosters, another of the winter resorts of Switzerland. Here is the longest and most well-known ski run in Switzerland. It's 11 miles long and the record for the entire distance is 7.5 minutes. We went by gondola to the top of the Gochnergrat, and unfortunately the clouds came down and we got a thorough wetting. For a few moments the clouds cleared and I was able to get a short glimpse of the top. Here we are, back on the usual coffee down in Gloucester's village. Tried our hand at many things, amongst them clock golf. The bogey for this one was 4. My wife managed 7. And then I tried. My first shot was way out. After many attempts, I don't mention how many, I finally made it. But I never reached the end. I finished up in the ornamental lake. That was my effort at clock golf. Here we are resting after our strenuous efforts. We are now on our way to a little village called Sertig, about 5 or 6 miles from Davos. Note again the rugged rock formation. We were unable to do full justice to the waterfall as we couldn't get it all in one shot. Here is the post bus. The post is carried in a little trailer at the back of the bus, and everything on Swiss roads gives way to the post bus. We were struck by the trusting attitude of all people in Switzerland. We are now on our way to the Stelvio Pass, one of the highest passes in Switzerland. On the slopes were people skiing. Here again you can notice the commercialization of every resort. All these huts were selling souvenirs, and I might say they were well patronized. There's the driver of the post bus. I tried to take a picture of a postcard but failed miserably. Even the Sisters of Mercy were out shopping at these various stalls. Here again, the clouds began to come down. We're now in the bus, and that is one of the glaciers. There we have the terminal moraine, the glacier. We never actually went on. This is again an artificial lake, made chiefly for hydroelectric power. An entire village was swamped when this was made. Back in Davos, here are typical houses. Our last trip out was to Austria, and this is Lindau on the shores of the Bodensee or Lake Constance. It was a most picturesque village, and we were taken up by the statues and by the buildings themselves. Here is a picture of the town hall, quite typical of the Austrian architecture. Swans abounded in the harbour. The pan round the harbour will show you what a picturesque sight it was. The temperature again was around 85 that day. Well, the boats, they seem to be top heavy, but they go out for carrying passengers and making money. That's the main object. This is the post office. Fine building, one of many. Following buildings are a few of the main landmarks of Lindau. Private house this was. main church of the village. Here we are in the small park at the entrance to the village. All the flowers were in full bloom and it was a marvellous sight. In order to get this shot, I went onto the grass and you should have seen the black looks I got from all the locals. We are now back in Boulogne, and as you can see, the weather was much duller. By the time we reached Folkestone, the rain was pouring down and it was typical English weather. Our holiday ended at Royston in Hertfordshire, where it had begun, for it was here that we left the car with my friend, former army pal. This is the little park at Royston, and as you can see, it is just one blaze of colour. I tried to take the picture of a bee, but I didn't even get its knees in. I did get a butterfly though, so there's some consolation in that. I'm improving. And that is the end of our holiday in Switzerland.